Very busy for a bit.
It's 7 o'clock. We're recording.
Are we ready?
We're ready.
All right. Can we bring the special meeting of March 21st, 2018 to order? Everybody stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Go ahead, Michelle. Roll call.
Councillor Albert?
Here.
Councillor LaRochelle?
Here.
Councillor Brunel?
Here.
Councillor Lunt?
Here.
Councillor Crawford?
Here.
Councillor Ward? Excused.
He's getting excused. Tardy.
And Councillor Colby? Here. All present on the counter board.
Next, please.
School budget presentation.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Tracy's making some copies of my actual summary page that I'll be reading from, but each of you should, in your packets tonight, Tracy's making a copy of that, but you should have a subsidy comparison report. You should have a copy of Haley put together a budget page that shows the changes that impact this budget sheet, highlighted a number of things that caused increases. Then she also put together a pie chart, colored pie chart that you should have that shows you the different areas in our budget. And then, of course, you should have the actual budget summary report all with you this early. Includes several variables, included the enacted figures from our ED 279. Normally when I'm meeting with you this time of year, I'm always telling you that state subsidy, our ED 279, and the ED 279 is the form that we get from the state that tells us what our state subsidy, et cetera, will be, what the local share needs to be and stuff. And so we've actually received that because the budget was enacted, unlike last year. So we do have those numbers in there, and there's a couple of other things that we've learned. The main PERS, or main state retirement numbers, have been, we've received those already. So normally I usually have this big list of variables. I say these could impact our budget. This year, those variables, although there are a couple of big ones that are out there, we should have those figures within the next couple of weeks, and I'll go over those as we go forward. The budget currently would have an increase on the local taxes in the amount of $654,893. The primary concern or challenge with this year's budget is that last year we utilized the unassigned account. We used an additional $209,451 in our unassigned account to help offset our budget last year. And what happened this year is we only turned over, when the audit came in, we only turned over back to the unassigned account just a little under $6,000 total. And for those that have asked why the number was so low, there's a couple of things. We needed to do a prior period adjustment for our salary. That was something that was missed. And then we also created the Gartley Street School program, which is our day treatment alternative ed program. So we used every penny that we had, literally, to get that program up and going. So again, we don't have those funds to utilize this year, although we have unassigned account or money that we're using for the unassigned amount. We don't have the additional $200,000 to offset this year's budget. So that's one of the main reasons why it's as high as it is right now. The other thing that everyone has to be aware of is that, as you may recall, last year when the state's budget was approved, there was legislation that said that 50% of whatever the school department received had to go towards taxes. And we used $200,000. Well, $200,000 of that additional state subsidy money was calculated into your municipal tax rate calculation as a revenue. The amount that went to the voters for our budget last year was actually raised, but then that $200,000 has been used as a revenue. And so it's not showing up in our numbers, but it's going to impact your taxes because it's $200,000 of revenue that you don't have. So again, that's something that needs to be out there. I know I've shared that with school committee members, and I know any counselors who have attended the school committee meetings have probably heard that. But that's a conversation that we need to have, because anytime you build, as I say every year, whenever you build a budget with revenue and you don't have that revenue the following year, it puts yourself in a real hole. And just again, that fund. So again, the total amount that was put to the voters was actually raised in taxes, and then the $200,000 additional subsidy was used to offset the municipal tax rate. So instead of coming out of if it would have came out of the school or whatever directly, then we would be dealing with it. But now we're all going to have to deal with that and figure out what we're going to do. The budget goals and focus for this year, of course, our primary goal every year is to maintain our current student programs and services, which are currently included in this budget. But we also added the one addition to this budget that we currently have is we did put in for a part-time maintenance person. We cut that position a few years ago, and I've had conversations with members of the board, and in my reports I've shared where it's frustrating when you walk into a building that's only 11 years old and tiles are broken, walls need to be painted, little things like that in a community. When you continue to ask for additional tax money, we just don't have the manpower to do that type of work, and it's, and so that's becoming quite a concern. I think we're going on 3 or 4 years now without any that maintenance position. We used to have a full-time maintenance position, and that was cut. So that is something that is included in this budget that is an outlier. So when you look at all those different lines, that's one of the few lines that you'll see in our budget that's an increase, and that's under facilities or maintenance lines under salaries. Other concerns we've had, although limited, we have had some community members. We had one person that came to our last board meeting, and I've received a couple of emails and phone calls from community members with everything going on with the school shootings and school security. A number of them have asked me they would like to have an additional SRO officer built into our budget. We haven't, although we're in the preliminary process of looking at what that would cost. I've met with Chief Hagan last week. Although we're looking at what that would cost and what our options are, those figures are not included in this particular budget at this time. As always, we'll look at our programs. We've had a number of people who have retired this year, so we'll look at restructuring. I know that's a term I've heard Diane use already this year. So we will look at restructuring as well and see what we can do to try to maintain the services that we have. But we do have a number of retirements and known resignations already this time of year. So one thing that's good about this budget is in years past, sometimes I have to do non-renewal letters for our probationary staff. And this year we won't have to do that. So we won't have to worry about losing staff who are worried about having a job because of the budget not being approved. So we're hoping that even with those resignations and retirements that we're able to offer, or we will be able to issue contracts to all of our staff, existing and current staff, by the deadline, which is in May. The governor's enacted budget has several funding changes. If any of you are watching or looking at it, I'm sure it's impacting your budget as well. But these changes are going to impact both the current and future budgets. Some of the biggest ones that impact our particular budget is Maine State Retirement, and in 2013 that was switched over from the state to the property taxes, and this year there was an increase of 0.4%, which is $11,733, which is one of those smaller increases, but overall that has an impact of our budget of $368,692, which is all additional money just since 2013 when that was switched over to local taxes. One of the things you're going to see over the next few months is that the general purpose aid, which is the term that's often used for school departments for educational funding, the enacted budget has an increase in that, so it looks like schools are receiving additional funding. However, that was created by raising the local mill rate. And so the mill rate went from 8.14 to 8.51. And so although the schools around the state will be receiving additional money, it's already impacting your mill rate. So in essence, you're going to be your valuation and stuff is all going to be taxed on that mill rate. And so it's really not money coming from a casino or rainy day fund. This is coming from just changing the way that they collect taxes. Another thing you'll hear is the 100% EPS. For years, you may have heard me mention the transition funds, which had to be raised locally. Although that looks like the budget, the enacted budget, looks like it's covering the 100% of the EPS versus the 97%. That allocation again was put into the mill rate calculation. So you're still in the past you had to raise that 3% locally. So you're still going to have to raise it. You just won't see, it won't be anything I can say in the budget that we have this transition amount because the state doesn't raise their appropriate, the amount of the 55% of education that they're supposed to raise. So that's no longer going to be discussed, but it's already been calculated. So it's already going to be put on it'll be put on your, again, on the property taxes. Another item that we need to pay attention to, and this is something that's I think was up at legislation today, is they're changing the way that career and technical centers and institutes are being funded. They're going to receive their own ED 279, and so there's a lot of conversations about that. Instead of the towns receiving funds for that money is going to go directly to the career and technical centers. They're going to be able to create their own boards. And one of the concerns is if these centers want to create programs or just raise tuition, that automatically will be distributed to the different communities without, you wouldn't be able to vote on it. They're just going to send us a bill. And so there's a lot of concern and a lot of conversation about that. I believe that with Lewiston LRTC, they're one of the few regions that actually has a lot of kids there. So the LRTC is probably one of the few regions that's going to benefit because they're going to get additional money because of the number of kids. There's smaller regional tech centers throughout the state that are going to lose funds, not the first year, but in the following years. But I'm hoping that we're fortunate because of the number of students that we currently have in our region that go to LRTC. As I mentioned before, the form that's usually most people's, the subsidy comparison report, that's usually the most important form for you as we move forward. And again, the subsidy report, if you look, you can see a comparison between 17-18, 18-19. The biggest thing is the difference in the use of the balance to help defray taxes. The unassigned account, last year we used $403,721. This year we were only we used $194,270. We did increase the revenues from the Gartley Street School, but again, those numbers, if you've heard our reports, those numbers can go anywhere from, I think we have 4 or 5 students, and 2 or 3 months ago we had 8 or 9. So again, you want to be real careful because the more students you have, you actually have to hire staff, and then that cuts into what your actual revenues are going to be or what your additional revenues will be. Other numbers are, you'll also see halfway down the transition amount. I've already mentioned that. In the past, it was $277,000 last year. This year it's 0, but again, that's all been calculated in the increase that you're going to receive as in regard to your valuation and your the mill rate and taxation. So this is the form obviously I'll be moving forward with. I usually will give you that, update the dates. Other changes, the next form that we have is like I said, Haley had put together the next 2 documents. One is the changes that impact this budget. Our state subsidy did increase this year. It went up $371,191, which is what a lot of people will be discussing, is the fact that schools are receiving more money. But the reason why we're receiving more money is because the taxes are going to be going up. The other thing that's important to note is that for years we've used a set amount. We usually calculate our salaries and benefits at $250,000, and it's, it's just as much my fault as anyone's, because I've asked for reports, and that's just the number we've always used. And Haley went through the system and recalculated it, and the actual amount to operate the schools, just salaries alone, is the increase is $455,000. So again, 16 years ago when we started having these conversations, 250 was probably the amount at that point, but in actuality, the amount's much more. And that doesn't include health insurance, which health insurance is currently budgeted at 9%, and that is the max. We just learned that last week that would be the max amount. So we're fortunate that way, but again, it's that itself is a over $234,000 increase. Workers' comp, we've had a number of issues with in reports. As a result, our mod rate went from 0.95 to 1.58, which was an increase of around $63,000, and that's going to impact us, as mentioned on this form, for 2 to 3 years. Water and sewer rate increase was around 12%. The half-time maintenance position is $28,759. And then retirements, there are people who have worked in the system for over 20 years. There is a retirement benefit that we pay. That's included in here. And then staff turnover and then changes in insurance. So sometimes you'll hire people who don't take insurance. Other times you'll hire people that take full family. So it's kind of it's hit and miss. You obviously can't go into an interview looking to hire somebody that doesn't. We hire the best people we can and don't really question, or we can't legally question what their insurances are. So that goes up and down. But like I said before, a lot of times when we have retirements, those staff usually only take single or two-person. They don't take full family. And then when we hire somebody new, even though we're saving on the base salary, they're taking full family, or within a year or two they've had children and are taking full family. The next document that you have is a pie chart. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but going back, does you mind if we ask questions as we go through the pages, or?
No, go ahead.
So in the past, that 250,000 figure was that uncontrollable yearly increase of just contractual agreements, right? So what you're saying is now it's about a 455,000 yearly. That's yearly, right?
Well, based on the percentage, we were at 2% last year, which is the highest percentage we've had in 9 years.
Okay.
So it all depends on what that percentage is. But again, we've calculated that like every quarter percent is around $70,000. So we've usually been in the 1.5, 1.75. So you take that down, it's 2%, which is the highest it's been. So if you take a couple percent off that, then or a 0.5%, it knocks that down pretty good. But this year alone, the increases.
So that's more of a realistic number we have going forward as far as for potential.
Definitely 250 isn't. Yeah, and that's, to be honest,
that's use that number.
You can ask
so,
anybody that's been part of these conversations since the superintendent before me. That was the number we've always used. I've asked to get those reports, and Haley is the first one that's been able to pull those accurate for me. Yeah. So we've always estimated that's what it is. So that's not the case. So that's every year when you look at those 50-something pages or whatever, when you see as many zeros, I've always wondered why. How can it be?
It doesn't balance, right?
It doesn't make any sense, and now it does because we were underestimating what it actually costs to operate a school system. We have 250-something employees, over 300 when it's part-time as well. So it does, it's
adds up quick.
It adds up quick, and of course even if you added 1 and 1.5% to the salaries for 16 years.
Yeah, it's.
So that, like, again, that was the number we used when I started here 16 years ago, and I have one director that's been here that long, and if you pull them aside and said, how much do we always use for a budget? It's the first number they'll throw out at you, because we've used it forever. Yeah. Now it's just not accurate.
Now the 9%, you said you actually have some figures already in. Is that 9% something you already know, or is that actually
No, we don't know. That's one thing when I get to it. That's the insurance is one of the main variables that are out there. And we have 9% budgeted, and that's the max.
Yeah.
What insurance has done is 1 year it was 0, next year it was 8 point something, and then it was 1.24 last year or something, and then I believe it's up and down. So I'm as much as I'd like to be hopeful, I'm guessing it's going to come in at 6-7%,
Insurance is still a crazy world out there. Right
especially
now.
with our workers' comp and stuff. I know we've been flagged for that.
Okay, good. I was just curious about those two numbers. Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, it all depends on what you have budgeted. I mean, we'll have a more realistic number because we just at 10:30 or 11 o'clock last night, we actually came to a tentative agreement with the teachers. So we'll know what those numbers will be for the next 3 years if it's ratified, which I'm assuming it will be.
Yeah, well, it's just important for people to understand how that $600,000-$700,000 increases. That there's close to 500,000 that really that's automatic every year. It just gets stacked on without actually making any changes at all, just from contracts of previous agreements in a sense. But.
And I think the next page, if you look at that pie chart, you'll see that what we actually have, when you look at salaries, benefits, and debt service, if you start adding those percentage up, I mean, salaries right now is almost 59% of our budget. Benefits are 19%. Debt service is 10%. So you're talking just salaries and benefits alone are 76%, and those are you can't do a whole lot with those. So the only place you can cut is, I mean, you can make reductions in personnel, obviously, which we've done, but as far as expenditures and stuff, you can't. Those lines have been 0 for the better part of. I mean, I don't even remember in the 9 years. I don't remember the last time we've asked for increases in anything except for technology and curriculum. The supply lines in the schools, although we've shifted it when we moved the 6th graders back to the middle school, other than that, those lines in those sheets, those lines have all been zeros. So, but that gives you a visual of what our budget is and what we can actually control. I mean, we try to do it through negotiations. I'm pretty confident once we release what we've agreed to that people will be happy with. The additional areas of potential savings or cost that are left, as I briefly mentioned, any anticipated or actual resignations that occur between now and obviously the start of the school year. Our capital reserve fund, it all depends on if something comes in unanticipated revenue. If for whatever reason we receive additional revenue from the Gartley Street School and we transfer it into the capital reserve. But again, that's unlikely. We do have, we always have savings through performance contract, and those numbers are generally pretty low. And so we always, the 2 years that we've had, the last 2 reports that we've received, we've actually saved more money than what they anticipated. So that because it's a guaranteed performance contract, and they want to pay the difference, so their numbers are usually a little bit lower. But the additional savings is what's helping us pay for our Phase 2 renovations of our performance contract. The LAA, which is the local agreement for administrators, and the LEA negotiations, we've reached tentative agreements with both of those. And so, although they haven't been signed yet, once they're signed, then we'll be able to adjust our numbers, and that should help. The Regional Service Center, that's one of the budgeted items with the new, the adopted budget or the enacted budget from the state. And we have completed Phase 1 with RSU4, and what that does is it allows us to create a service center that will help us create a system that we take care of their out-of-district placed kids, which would be a savings. They're saving money by sending them to us, and we're making money because we're bringing in revenue. And so through that, once we get that, it has to be voted on by the school committee, and it still needs to be voted on by the community. We were originally waiting to see if any new legislation was going to throw that out, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So we're meeting with RSU4 next week, and we're probably going to have those conversations and continue to move, because in everyone's budget, if you're not part of a regional center, then you're going to be penalized a percentage per student this year, and then it almost triples for the following years. We could probably cover that with our revenues from the Gartley Street, but for what support and what effort it's going to take to create a service center, now that the language on the interlocal agreements, that was the big piece that if you originally they said that if you needed to create an interlocal agreement that you couldn't get out of if any of the systems within it were going to lose money. That language has all been reinterpreted by attorneys, so now there's interlocal agreements you can get out of if you need to. So for us, I believe it makes sense to just move forward with that for what little we're already doing it, so we might as well get credit for it instead of being penalized. So that's something that the board will have to reconsider as we move forward. Restructuring, anytime we have retirements or resignations, we always look at restructuring different programs and then services. I've already gone over our salaries or benefits. The one thing about insurance, we should know that number, I want to say by early April. So hopefully within the next few weeks we'll have ratified all of our agreements and then also received our insurance numbers. Special education enrollment and local entitlement numbers, those are always a variable. You can have students move in, you can have students move out. We're fortunate because now we can take care of all of our out-of-district place kids. There's only, I believe there's 2 right now, but again, those students are in settings that they need support, and we weren't in a position, whether it was a medical type of situation or just a behavior type of situation, we didn't have the capacity to take care of those students. But before we had the Gartley Street School, you're looking at, we probably would have had 10 or 12 kids out. So. Although it's expensive, I think last year, I think the numbers we were using around 600,000, but if we were sending those students out, it would have been 800,000, so it's a savings each year, not counting the revenues, which we didn't have a lot last year, but we're hoping to increase as we move forward. The unassigned amount, that again comes down to the unanticipated revenue, but right now it doesn't look like we're going to be able to utilize any additional unassigned account money. And then the increases are the facilities and grounds and maintenance position at halftime, which is just under $29,000. The last document that I provided is our actual budget summary report, and it's probably 40 pages long, but I think if you look through that, the majority of the numbers on the right are all zeros. And with the exception of salaries and benefits, or usually changes in personnel. But it provides you with the numbers from 17-18 and then our proposed budget for next year. Any other questions or?
No easy button?
What's that?
No easy button, no?
Well, it is nice having the numbers early,
Yep.
but I just wish they were better numbers, I guess. I mean, last year I think what we went to the town for 500 and something thousand, which was the highest that I can remember. So we're hoping that with all these changes, or at least what we have coming in the next couple of weeks, that we'll be able to get closer to that. I think that just the reality of knowing that it costs a lot more.
Yeah, uncontrollable
lot more
costs.
money, and it wasn't an easy conversation to tell that to the school committee either, because everybody on the board pretty much has always used 250, so we've always tried to get as close to 250 as we could. But it's, things have changed, and you have 16 years worth of contracts.
I know last year you were really hopeful about the Gartlett Street School.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you where is that as far as your expectations?
Well, actually, we over budgeted revenue last year because we didn't understand how difficult and time-consuming it was to do the billing for Main State, Main Care. But this year we're doing a better job of that, so we actually increased that in this budget from, I think last year we might have budgeted, or we added 130,000. Or the year before, it was the first year was like 130,000 revenue is what we thought we were going to bring in, and we barely brought in roughly around 70. So that hurt us 2 years ago. This year we're at 91, or 79, and we're pretty confident we'll come in at that. but it's real. We had to hire, actually, we had to change some staffing because we had to make sure we had the ed techs need to be able to be BHPs, behavior trained, so that they could actually bill out the units for the students. So we literally had to shift staff. We changed. We had a psychological service provider. We added. That person left, so we didn't fill that. We added another social worker who can actually bill. So we're hoping that the revenues will be right there. But when we add students, especially like when we're working with RSU4, every 4 students we add, we legally have to add another ed tech. So then that cuts into your revenues, because they have to be ed tech 2s or 3s. 3s preferably, because then you can bill for them. And there are very few people out there that have the ed tech 3 certification that want to work in a behavior program. We're very fortunate. People we've hired down there, all but a couple have stayed, and so it's a pretty dynamic group, and they've done a really nice job. So we're fortunate that the core people are down there and doing the work. It's night and day compared to what it was when it started. The students are much. We just had a lockdown drill, and the students were amazing. The first fire drill, I remember the public safety officials coming out of the building and just shaking their heads, saying, "Wow, that wasn't what we expected." But the kids now are used to. They have structure and they're used to the school, and they did a really nice job.
Some big picture kind of Gartley observations is that we talked about $200,000 in savings, cost savings, by not sending our students elsewhere. That's the first thing I'm hearing there.
Yeah, if we didn't, that's the difference. Is it's not money that we had budgeted.
Right.
It's money if we sent like we have a few kids down there now that we would obviously keep here, but if we sent all those students out, it would cost you another $200,000. So that's the bad part, is that it's not savings. It's savings, but it's not money that you had to save. So you can't take that 200 and use it somewhere else.
Yeah, it's not like it's realized we can say, okay, let's reallocate that somewhere
Right.
else. It's just saying that the current number that we're coming in today could have $200,000 attached to it as well. In
200,
theory.
yeah.
So when I say that, I say, okay, there's $200,000 that we're saving, even though we can't reallocate it, on top of the revenue of close to what you said, about $80,000.
Correct.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's what we have to generate just to break even on the. Yep.
Thank you.
But they're doing, again, the billing is getting, is much better. But one of the things, I'll be honest, one of the things that's happened is we've had at least 3 or 4 students that were tuition in here are being transferred here, and all three families moved here. So then you go from receiving a certain amount per day to being your kids.
Building it in your budget.
So you don't.
Yeah.
So if you build that, if you think you're going to have 8, that's what we had 8 kids 3 months ago. Now we have 6 because 3 of them moved to the town.
Some uncontrollable things, you can't.
Yeah. I mean, we do receive obviously subsidy for that, but not like we don't receive the $175, $200 a day.
I wasn't able to make your budget presentation for the school board. Did the school board actually come forward with any recommendations or goals towards what they're?
They told me they wanted me to look into what it would cost to have an SRO officer, additional SRO officer. That's where we are, because they still know that we have a couple variables out there, not big ones, but we have. I mean, they could be relatively big, but and I looked into that with the chief, as I mentioned earlier, and we've. We have some numbers of what it might cost, and then we're also looking at contractually what we can do. And then personnel-wise, I know that
So
we can have that conversation.
That 654, 893 could be plus or minus 75 to 100,000. Is that what you're thinking? I mean.
Yeah, I would hope. Yeah. It all comes down to insurance. If insurance comes in at 9%, then that's going to hurt, because I don't know what the salary piece will be, because we'd have some openings and stuff. But yeah, I'd like our goal, and I think I have a few of the school committee members here, but we would like to get it as close to what it was last year.
Circle back around to that SRO talk, because I know that came up in that it was a concerned community member who came up and voiced an opinion, and so I know that was brought forward, but also there was some creative planning and talk about how maybe we could also look to work with the chief
Mhm.
on some alternatives. I mean, one that was floated, and I just want to put it out there, was that offering the officers office space in the schools to do their paperwork. So that way there is a presence, but it's not necessarily something that would fall into a budgeted piece rather than having to do their paperwork here. So while it would be a stopgap, it might be something that, that sort of creative thinking to kind of help maybe address the concern and also make sure that we're doing our due diligence by the taxpayers as well.
Yeah, we should be we can do that. We would be able to do that. All that they would need is computer access to be able to access the mainframe down here, and we already have that because the SRO officers are able to link in. So it's just a matter of, I mean, that is an option.
Excellent.
I mean, we looked at 4 or 5 options, and again, some of them cost. The biggest expense would be to add a full-time SRO, and then there's obviously some contract language in regard to who you can hire and who you can utilize, and then there's the minimum hours. So we had a pretty extensive conversation, but there's no additional funding in this particular budget for that. And again, there's $20 million. The state is in the process of pushing a bill through for 20 million plus, or $20 million worth of security renovations for schools. To be honest, we're probably in better shape than most of the schools with all the security cameras and the key cards and everything that we've done over the years. So I don't know what we qualify for, and then I don't know if I would be if you get involved in a grant like we did with the original SROs, then at some point you're going to end up owning it. So it's a
Runs
kind
out
of a
eventually.
double-edged sword with that, is that you receive grant money to add an SRO, and then after a couple of years that you don't receive the grant money anymore. So I don't know what we'll qualify for, but I can almost assure you, based on conversations I've had with other superintendents, that our security systems are as good than quite a few.
The workman's comp part, that is already a fixed number for this upcoming budget. That is.
Yep. Yeah, they send us the mod rate, and then we actually have to do some training
I was gonna say,
because
with that, they
we're
bring through
flagged as a.
some
Yep.
some
And
internal.
it's
internal
honestly
improvements,
been a lot of people slipping on ice. Last couple of years, it's been. I mean, it happens. I mean, I don't know. Every day we have people slipping. It's not like we're neglecting or anything like that, but it's happening while they're at work, going to their cars, and
We're having the same issue with our workers' comp.
I mean, it's
I mean, we've received warnings last 2 years. They're telling us, make sure you get out there, make sure you sand, because there's so many people slipping and falling and hurting themselves. Because anytime somebody does something at work, we have to file a claim.
It's really sad because we live in Maine. Well, it's not nice. I mean, that's kind of, it's not unusual. But I guess that was my question: is the percentage of that actually from that? I mean, from I know probably some of the circumstances at Gartley actually probably involve more how would I say, managed care than maybe is any of that workman's comp coming from. Have you seen an increase of workman's comp coming from that program
no.
at all? No,
Mm-mm.
it's strictly from.
No, we have had some special education students. One that when I say we have a couple that are out of district, one in particular we had to send out of district because we had multiple workers' comp claims because they were big and strong and aggressive.
Yeah, I'm just curious if
Yeah,
that was
no, I mean
something
that
was added
did
to
attribute to, but nothing in Gartley that I mean. Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I shouldn't say that. That's it. There's at least one incident that I know of, and that was somebody did get hurt because they were dealing with something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's possible.
But it's not an everyday occurrence. I have more reports when people fall on the ice.
Interesting. Yep.
Anybody else?
It's a big number, but I guess we're dealing with the same situation. So I mean, it's
Leaping off point too. That's so I kind of put it in perspective. It's not the hopefully it's not the end game.
No, it usually isn't when I present this time of year. But the biggest difference is that we have more numbers than we've ever had. I don't remember a time we've ever had an ED 279 in the last 8 years this early.
Is your insurance based off usage? I mean, is that done locally? Is that actually a state,
No,
a
that's
state pool?
through Maine School Management.
So it's a state pool, so basically it's based
Yep.
on their,
MEA, yep. And they, like I said, we just received the email the other day, and they told us that the max would be 9%. So we at least budgeted that. And I've been saying all along that 1 year it's low, 1 year it's high. So it's almost like it tries to equal itself out. Instead of just keeping it at 4.5% every year, they get you with a 9, and then they let you have a 1.2. So we had our low number last year. I don't like to think we could, but we'll see.
With the change in the Blaine House this year too, we may see, hopefully, but next year this time, see a change in perspective on how. I just think what I'm trying to drive at is that there's been a pretty significant push of cost down to the local level, and I would like to think that eventually the folks in Augusta will take a look at that and realize that that is a recipe for disaster if they continue down that road. So.
Well, from what I heard from the people that are up there in Augusta right now, they said it's as busy as they've ever seen it. There's so much legislation going through right now that there's actually not enough time to work on half of the stuff that they're talking about, and so they're pulling stuff. I mean, the governor he made a proposal and then pulled it today, and that usually doesn't happen. But there's so much going on up there right now. They're busy. And of course, it is campaign year, so generally anybody runs is going to say something. They want to support schools to try to get votes, and then you see what happens.
and goes for a while probably, right? So the next time we actually meet with you folks is to adopt the budget, I mean their school budget on May 7th. Is that there's no other interactions or unless there's some type of concerns coming up?
Yeah, I should know the two big variables are the insurance and the negotiations, and I can't. I mean, the negotiations are in tentative agreement, so that just needs to be enacted. So once that's done, then I can share those numbers, but I can't do anything with them until. But they're going to help. Pretty happy with what the committees have been able to negotiate.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I guess we go to number 4 then.
Adjournment.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Thank you.
How's it feel to be out there, sir? Kind of good?
How's it feel? Thanks for stopping by.
This is what you just gave us, right?
I always thought school was right